What if I told you that surviving a traumatic event is actually the easy part for your brain?
Yeah, that sounds completely counterintuitive, right?
Right. I mean, if you think about the way pop culture usually handles survival, it's always the hero narrowly escapes the exploding building, they take this deep breath, and then the screen just fades to black.
The credits roll.
Exactly. The credits roll. We are fed this comforting illusion that simply making it out alive is the finish line.
But the neurobiological reality is much, much darker than that.
It really is. The real threat to your identity doesn't happen while you are dodging the explosion. It happens the next morning when your brain wakes up and realizes it has to completely rewrite the story of who you are.
Right, because surviving the event itself is just adrenaline and instinct.
Yeah,
It's
but
pure biology.
just keeping the heart beating.
Exactly. But the aftermath is this entirely new, deeply disorienting landscape. The basic architecture of your mind has fundamentally shifted. Everything from how you process memory to your baseline hormone production, it all operates under a new set of emergency protocols.
And that terrifying shift is exactly what we are exploring in today's deep dive.
It's such a massive topic.
It is. We are embarking on an exploration of the real-world science of psychology, neurobiology, and even the philosophy of healing. And to do this, we are looking through a really unique lens.
A fictional sci-fi and fantasy epic called Vitae, The Awakening.
Which is just an incredible backdrop for this.
Oh, absolutely. Fiction offers a brilliant framework for this kind of analysis. It allows us to examine the absolute hardest truths of human psychology from a safe distance.
Yeah.
It magnifies the internal stakes.
Right. So for this deep dive, we are examining two profoundly traumatized protagonists from the book. First, we have Kurien.
Kurien is an elite, magically altered conscript warrior, a Vitae.
Yeah, and he has endured immense, just horrifying psychological and physical torture in a Santerrie Inquisitor's vault.
And then we also have Sharina, who is a survivor of horrific, prolonged captivity and violation.
So we are going to use their journeys to really understand the real-world concept of healing in the aftermath. And I want to give you, the listener, a promise right up front.
A big promise.
A huge promise. By the time we finish this deep dive, we are going to completely debunk the biggest myth society peddles about trauma recovery.
And that myth is everywhere.
It is. We are constantly told that healing is about going back to normal, about returning to who you were before the bad thing happened.
Which is just not how the brain works.
At all.
Yeah.
Healing is not about going back. It is about building someone entirely new from the wreckage.
To understand the mechanics of how we do that, we really have to look at how trauma literally shatters the stories we tell about ourselves.
Right.
The psychological framework for this is called narrative identity. Humans rely heavily on narrative memory.
We're storytelling creatures.
Exactly. Your brain acts like an archivist. It's constantly organizing your life into a coherent story, and it's supposed to be chronological and contextual.
Like, I was born here, then I went to this school.
Right? Then this event changed my career path, and that's why I am who I am today.
So you are the author, and the story has a clear, linear timeline.
But trauma takes a sledgehammer to that timeline.
It really does.
The mechanism behind this is fascinating, actually. During a moment of extreme terror, your brain floods with cortisol, which is the primary stress hormone.
Just a massive spike.
A massive chemical dump. And this dump literally knocks the hippocampus offline.
Wow.
Yeah. And the hippocampus is the part of your brain responsible for context and time-stamping memories.
So the timekeeper just goes down?
It goes completely dark. Because it's disabled, the traumatic memory gets dumped directly into the amygdala, which is your brain's raw threat center, without a time or date attached to it.
Okay, so think of your hippocampus like a librarian, right?
Just like that.
And the librarian's sole job is to file memories chronologically on the shelves.
Right.
But when trauma happens, a fire breaks out in the library.
Right, chaos.
Total chaos. The librarian flees. The memories aren't filed away in the past section. They are left burning in the middle of the room.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it.
So when a survivor gets triggered years later, their brain doesn't say, oh, I am remembering a fire from 5 years ago. It literally says the library is on fire right now.
Exactly. Trauma memories are fragmented, they're sensory-driven, and they are completely nonlinear. And we see the ultimate, just devastating extreme of this shattered narrative in Kurien's storyline.
Oh man, Kurien's storyline is rough.
It is. To survive the agonizing torture of the Inquisitor's vault, his brain constructs a massive, incredibly detailed illusion to wall off the fire.
Right, he wakes up to discover that his fondest memories, 12 years of a peaceful, loving life with a woman named Myasuchi.
A deep, magical blood bond, raising a child together.
Yeah, all of it. Completely fabricated. His brain built this impenetrable fortress of false memories just to protect his psyche from collapsing in the vault.
And the cognitive dissonance he experiences when that illusion breaks is just staggering. His internal narrative of peace directly conflicts with the lived reality of his mutilated body.
So tragic.
He asks this heart-wrenching question in the book. He says, "How should I react learning my fondest memories are from a world that doesn't exist? Who am I now? Am I a tortured man who hasn't the memories of his torture?"
You can just feel the floor dropping out from under his entire identity.
Completely.
When your timeline shatters, who you are shatters with it. Because memory under extreme stress is reconstructive, not archival. The brain always prioritizes immediate survival over historical accuracy.
Which brings us to the first real-world hurdle for survivors of complex PTSD or prolonged abuse.
Right.
Healing requires the restoration of narrative identity. You have to painstakingly reclaim the authorship of your own life.
You have to write a new story.
A new story that integrates the pain and the missing time rather than trying to erase it or pretend it didn't happen.
And I think the trap so many of us fall into is trying to force the scrambled words back into the old narrative.
Oh, absolutely.
We want the book to read exactly the way it did before the chapters were ripped out. But rewriting that mental narrative is almost impossible when your physical body is still screaming that you are in mortal danger.
You cannot logic your way out of a physiological alarm system.
Right. You can't heal the narrative mind without addressing the physical nervous system. The body absolutely keeps the score.
It does. And this physiological reality is vividly illustrated through Sharina's journey.
Yeah, let's talk about Sharina. Her backstory is harrowing. She has suffered extreme violation, captivity, and just the total loss of her bodily autonomy.
She has no safe baseline.
None. But later in the story, there's this incredibly poignant scene. Kurien, who is, by all accounts, a fearsome, violently dangerous warrior, he tenderly bandages her injured hand.
Right.
And despite everything her body has been conditioned to expect from men in power, she looks at him and says, "This Kurien, I don't believe means to harm me."
From a neurobiological standpoint, what is happening in that quiet moment is massive.
Really? Just from a bandage?
Yes, because Sharina is battling somatic memory. Her trauma is stored in her muscles, her heart rate, her breathing.
Ah, okay.
Her initial reactions to any physical touch or proximity are governed by that hyperactive amygdala we talked about earlier.
The fire alarm.
Right, the fire alarm. Her nervous system has been ruthlessly conditioned to equate vulnerability with pain. Her brain's threat detector is rusted, stuck in the on position.
So even if she is trying to rationally tell herself, like, I am out of the cage, I am safe now.
Her nervous system hasn't gotten the memo. The prefrontal cortex, which is the logical reasoning part of the brain, is being completely drowned out by the amygdala's alarm bells.
Wow.
But the human brain possesses an incredible trait called neuroplasticity.
The ability to rewire itself.
Exactly. It can rewire its own circuitry based on new experiences. When Kurien approaches her without demand, moving predictably and transparently, he creates this tiny window where her expectations of violence are subverted.
So that cognitive mismatch, anticipating pain but receiving care, that triggers a chemical shift.
A profound chemical shift. The moment she allows him to bandage her hand, the cortisol loop begins to break.
The stress hormone drops.
Yes, the brain recognizes the safety and releases a surge of oxytocin. And oxytocin does something vital here. It suppresses the amygdala.
Oh, wow.
It literally turns down the volume on the alarm bells, which finally allows the logical prefrontal cortex to come back online and process the present moment accurately.
So the physical safety allows the psychological thawing to begin.
Precisely.
But hold on, looking at this from the outside, relying on another deeply traumatized person to fix your brain chemistry seems wildly dangerous.
I can see why you'd say that.
Doesn't that just create a toxic trauma bond? I mean, you have two people who are essentially drowning, and they're just grabbing onto each other for buoyancy.
That is a very common concern when looking at trauma recovery, and it highlights a critical misunderstanding of what a trauma bond actually is.
Okay, lay it on me.
A toxic trauma bond is rooted in fear, coercion, and control. It is a cyclical dependency where the abuser provides both the terror and the relief from that terror.
Oh, I see.
The victim becomes addicted to the intermittent relief.
So the chemical spikes are being manipulated by someone else who is holding all the power.
Exactly. But what is happening with Kurien and Sharina is the exact opposite of that. It is true emotional reconnection, And the defining difference here is the restoration of agency.
Agency, right.
Sharina was entirely stripped of her bodily autonomy during her captivity. By choosing to let Kurien bandage her hand, by independently evaluating that this specific version of him is safe, she is relearning how to wield power over her own physical boundaries.
She is testing a renewed sense of empowerment.
Yes.
So it's not about him fixing her broken chemistry. It's about him providing a steady, predictable environment where her own nervous system can naturally regulate itself.
You nailed it.
Her active choice to trust him is a massive assertion of autonomy.
Trauma violently disconnects individuals from their own bodies and their emotions. Healing restores that connection, often through safe, boundaried relationships, where emotional expression is met with stability, not punishment.
That makes a lot of sense. But neurobiology only tells us how the brain adapts, right?
Right.
It explains the mechanics of neuroplasticity and the hormone regulation, but it doesn't tell us why someone would willingly go through the sheer agony of doing it.
It is incredibly difficult work.
Rewiring a traumatized brain is excruciating. Why not just stay numb? Why go through the effort of facing the things that broke you?
To answer the why, we really have to move past the physical brain and look at the existential toll of survival.
Okay.
We have to look at the darkest parts of what it takes to stay alive. We have to look at the monster.
Yeah, because surviving isn't always pretty.
Not at all.
To endure the Inquisitor's vault, Kurien goes through a terrifying transformation. He is forced to tap into this Sanite demon aspect of his magical power.
He essentially becomes an absolute force of indiscriminate violence just to stay alive.
And there is this chilling moment later where he looks in a mirror and recoils from his own reflection. He describes his own eyes as vacant, expressionless, and lusterless.
He realizes he looks exactly like the monsters who tortured him.
That mirror scene is just a devastating portrayal of moral injury.
It is. And it brings us to a vital philosophical lens in trauma recovery reconciliation with the self.
Meaning what, exactly?
True healing requires forgiving the versions of yourself that acted under extreme duress. What Kurien is experiencing connects directly to the psychological concept of shadow integration, which was famously pioneered by Carl Jung.
Right, the shadow being all the repressed, dark, or, socially unacceptable parts of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge.
Exactly. The monster Kurien became in the vault isn't some external curse that possessed him. It is the literal, concentrated embodiment of his repressed rage, his profound grief, and his raw, unfiltered survival instinct.
Wow.
Jungian psychology teaches us a terrifying truth. Repressing the shadow actually gives it power.
Because subconscious energy has to go somewhere.
Right. If you deny the monster, it leaks out as explosive triggers, self-sabotage, or destructive behavior.
You can't just lock the monster in the basement and pretend it's not down there banging on the pipes.
You really can't. The only way to achieve psychological wholeness is integration. You have to bring the shadow up from the basement, look it in the eye, and acknowledge that it is part of you.
That sounds terrifying.
It is. You have to say, I recognize the violence you're capable of, and I recognize that you kept me alive. But you do not steer the ship anymore?
It's like we all have this internal ledger of things we did just to survive.
Yes.
Obviously, for most of us, it wasn't a literal magical torture vault.
Right, thankfully.
But maybe it was surviving a toxic, cutthroat workplace where you had to, throw a colleague under the bus to keep your livelihood.
Or a vicious, drawn-out divorce where you said incredibly cruel things just to protect your own heart.
Exactly. Or maybe it was profound grief, and your survival mechanism was shutting everyone out and becoming completely ice cold to the people who loved you.
We all have those moments.
And when you finally get to the other side, the hardest person to forgive on that ledger isn't the person who hurt you. It's the ruthless version of you that had to take the wheel.
You are describing the absolute core of existential renewal. This philosophy asserts that healing is not a passive passage of time.
Time does not heal all wounds.
No, it just covers them in scar tissue. True healing is a deliberate moral act. It is the conscious choice to look at that internal ledger, acknowledge the shadow, and declare, my pain shaped me, but it does not define who I will become.
And that is the exact realization Kurien has to fight his way toward. Accepting that the vault changed him permanently, but refusing to let the Inquisitors write his ending.
We see this exact existential struggle everywhere in the real world. Think about combat veterans grappling with profound moral injury, the impossible, haunting actions they had to take to keep their unit alive at a war zone.
Yeah.
Think about individuals trying to break generational cycles of abuse, terrified because they recognize the abuser's temper or manipulation tactics residing inside their own shadow.
Or communities trying to rebuild after systemic historical oppression.
Exactly. They all face the same agonizing choice Kurien faces. Integrate the survival mechanisms, accept them for what they were, or be entirely consumed by them.
I hear it all the time from people who've been through the ringer. They say, I just want to go back to normal. I want to be the person I was before the accident, before the diagnosis, before the loss.
It's the most natural desire in the world.
But everything we've unpacked today, the shattered narrative memory, the rewired neurobiology, the integration of the shadow, it proves that going backward is a physiological and psychological impossibility.
It is. The clinical term for the alternative is post-traumatic growth.
Post-traumatic growth.
Yes. It shifts the entire paradigm of recovery. It emphasizes that the goal is not a return to a pre-trauma baseline.
Okay.
The goal is the emergence of a new personal strength, a deeper capacity for empathy, reoriented life priorities, and existential clarity. You aren't just repairing the old house, you are building an entirely new architecture for your identity using the rubble.
You aren't bouncing back, you are bouncing forward. The old book is gone, the pages are burned, you are the author of the new one.
And taking on that authorship requires an unimaginable amount of courage. It requires facing the terrifying reality of false narratives, manually calming the somatic alarms ringing in your own bloodstream, and extending grace to the shadow self that kept you breathing when nothing else could.
It's the hardest work a person can do.
There's a line from Kurien in the Dossier that captures this transition perfectly. She says, "We survived the ruin, now we must learn how to live."
We survived the ruin, now we must learn how to live. Survival is just the prerequisite. Living is the actual conscious work.
Beautifully said.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with something new to mull over. We talked a lot about authoring a new story for yourself and letting go of the person you were before the trauma.
Right.
But what happens to the people in your life who only want to read your old story? If healing means building an entirely new, formidable identity out of the wreckage, it also means some people aren't going to recognize you anymore.
That is a harsh reality.
It is. When you finally become the fearless author of your own survival, who do you have to leave behind in the rough draft?
Growth often outpaces the environments that kept us small. Reclaiming your agency means accepting that the new version of you might not fit into the old spaces you used to occupy.
So the next time you feel like you are standing in the aftermath, wondering why the credits haven't rolled to save you, remember, the aftermath isn't the end of the movie. It's just page 1 of the rewrite.
And you get to decide what happens next.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Take care of yourselves, and we'll catch you next time.